Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Trust the weekend was a good one. Macro thoughts, the big picture still remains cloudy, with the two main risk factors right now being commodity prices still going lower and whether the Chinese government has things under control, and I don't think they do. Another quote from Phil Orlando, Chief Equity Market Strategist, Federated Investors. This is a tsunami of negative psychology being driven by China. China was again the epicenter of unease on Monday as the People's Bank confounded analysts by guiding the yuan sharply stronger. Holger tweeted Red Monday in China. And normally they come in just as the market closes and lift it. This time they didn't, the market fell. And Holger also tweeted an image of the volatility that we've seen. And I'll come to that now. I've written my piece over the weekend was 2016 starts with a bang. The year 2016 started with a bang. North Korea's Little Kim set off a bomb, and the global media has been busy challenging whether it really was an H-bomb. In a show of support for South Korea and as a show of force, the US deployed a B-52 bomber on a low-level flight over South Korea on Sunday. Saudi Arabia conducted its first mass execution of political opponents, and 63 religious extremists were publicly beheaded for the 1979 siege in the Grand Mosque of Mecca. The execution of Sheikh Nimr-al-Nimr was the catalyst for the sacking of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's embassy in Tehran, and relations between the two have apparently entered a tailspin. Last year I spoke of how the world had entered a new arrhythmic, which is an irregular heartbeat, normal, and the geopolitical heart in the year 2016 has evidently not normalized. Geopolitics was, however, eclipsed by events in the financial markets. Nowadays, the markets begin their day in China. China sets the tone for the rest of the day. China's Shanghai Composite slid 10% for the week, but that does not tell the whole story. There was carnage in a week that saw two abbreviated trading sessions, one of just 29 minutes, and by Friday the authorities decided to ditch the whole circuit breaker business. Massive buying by state institutions staunched losses which would have been off the charts otherwise. Chinese weakness spilt over into other markets, with the DAX falling below 10,000 for the first time since October. Europe's stock 600 index lost 6.7% for the biggest drop in 4 years. Emerging market equities fell 6.8%. The S&P 500 suffered its worst 5-day opening to a year on record, going back to 1929. And the Dow notched its worst start to the year on record, dating back to 1897. The Chicago Board Options Exchange Volatility Index surged 48% to 27.01. Biggest jump in a month, left it 61% above the one-year average of 16.7. This is extreme price action any which way you care to slice it. Crude prices plunged to a 12-year low. I wrote this on Sunday morning, and look headed into the $20 to $30 range as early as this week. Commodity prices have cratered except for gold, which is of course a geopolitical proxy, which got a nice pop back to the $1,100 area. Commodity-based currencies dropped like a stone. The commodity markets have been a persistent signal in the noise. The Japanese yen rallied big, and actually one of my conviction trades for 2016 is to buy the yen against just about everything. Dollar yen closed 117.30 Friday, and I think can get to 105 and even 95 this year. There are clearly winners and losers in Africa, the big elephants in the room, Nigeria and South Africa, which together make up considerably more than 50% of sub-Saharan African GDP, are getting mauled. Madame Lagarde was in Lagos and trying her elegant level best to cajole President Buhari into devaluing the naira, and at a time of his choosing, rather than in a disorderly manner and at a time of the market's choosing. A 20 to 25% devaluation of the naira is predicted and predictable. In South Africa, the rand traded back above 16 on Friday, and within a whisker of David Van Rooyen lows, actually blew through those lows overnight. I have an admittedly outlier call of 20 to the dollar in 2016. In a bear market, the President Zuma's haircut is going to get deeper and deeper. There is no Hail Mary pass coming for the commodity producers, and from Abuja to Luanda, from Lusaka to Johannesburg, the denouement is still ahead, and the risks of a disorderly breakdown are spiking, just like the Chicago Board Options Exchange Volatility Index. Which brings me back now to East Africa and Kenya. There is a massive trend change occurring in front of our eyes in what was a particularly previously intractable problem: the perennial current account deficits. This is an important point to note. Our import bills, fuel and associated product are the single biggest expense item. Have created, at current prices, I estimate Kenya is onside by $150 a month. This is big, and this is why the shilling has turned Teflon. In fact, whilst Kenya still runs behind Tanzania and of course Ethiopia on a GDP basis, this part of Africa is now outperforming the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, and the outperformance is accelerating, and we might just find ourselves in a sweet spot. Going back to the beginning of my article, which was North Korea's Little Kim set off a bomb, let me put up the front page of the New Yorker, which speaks to this, that everybody's poo-pooing whether it's an H-bomb or not. And the hidden theme seems to be that Little Kim is teensy-weensy, has a teensy-weensy bomb and a teensy-weensy willy. Home thoughts: sand from the Sahara Desert helps to fertilize the Amazon rainforest. We live in such an interconnected world, don't we? Chauvet cave paintings of volcanic eruption from 36,000 years ago as captured by prehistoric man. Pretty extraordinary. I've been trying to finish the third book in the Frank Bascom saga, The Lay of the Land by Richard Ford. It started with The Sports Writer, which was brilliant, but obviously Frank was a lot younger then. Then we had from The Sports Writer, I can't remember the name of the next one, but anyway, I'm reading the third, which is The Lay of the Land. For your life to be worth anything, you must sooner or later face the possibility of terrible, searing regret, he says. And there are no transcendent themes in life. Now, the book I'm reading is when he's about 50, 55, and Nisha said to me over the weekend, "You're really quiet." And I said, "I'm reading The Lay of the Land," and he's in his 50s now, and I'm finding his concerns a little too familiar. At the exact moment any decision seems to be being made, it's usually long after the real decision was actually made, like light we see emitted from stars. Now the final quote: "The most important things of your life can change so suddenly, so unrecoverably, that you can forget even the most important of them and their connections. You are so taken up by the chanciness of all that's happened, and by all that could and will happen next." Political reflections: the US flew a B-52 Stratofortress over South Korea after the North's nuclear test. South Korea continued to conduct high-decibel propaganda broadcasts across the heavily militarized border into the North on Sunday, which they find particularly annoying. A top North Korean official told a rally on Friday that the broadcasts had pushed the rival Koreas to the brink of war. I conclude by saying it feels like a game until the moment it doesn't. Let me put up a photograph of a B-52 Stratofortress. Take you back to November 2010, when I rode far away in distant lands lies the Hermit Kingdom. This land is ruled by the House of Kim, and its capital is in Pyongyang. Let me put up a photograph of Pyongyang at sunset. And then I said, they all have had tiny little hands like the elves and the shoemaker. Let me put up a photograph of Kim Jong-un with his father Kim Jong-il, and you'll see what I mean about the tiny little hands. Bear in mind, this country has nuclear weapons, and on its border with its neighbor South Korea sit 25,000 American soldiers. Put up another photograph of the US Air Force B-52 bomber flying over the Osan Air Base on Jan 10. And then a photograph of this propaganda, this noise propaganda, K-pop barrage, and the gigantic speakers they put up there on the border. El Chapo, this was what big news over the weekend, speaks a secret visit with the most wanted man in the world by Sean Penn. Brilliant actor, really, I think largely underestimated as an actor. There's one with Christopher Walken, I can't remember, it's father and son. The father is like a murderer. Brilliant, he is brilliant. And then this Falcon and the Snowman, which is what I think encouraged El Chapo to speak with him, saying that it's a whole. The link is from Rolling Stone is there. It's very interesting. Let me just get to a couple of points. Chapo sticks to an illicit game, proudly volunteering. I supply more heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, and marijuana than anybody else in the world. I have a fleet of submarines, airplanes, trucks, and boats, he said. Did you ever use drugs? No, sir. Many years ago, yes, I did try them, but an addict, no. What is the outlook for the business? Do you think it will disappear, or will it grow instead? No. It will not end, because as time goes by, we are more people, and this will never end. Put up a photograph of him from the Rolling Stone magazine. Saudi Arabia may take more measures against Iran in execution row. This is the foreign minister. The escalation is coming from Iran, not from Saudi Arabia or the GCC. We are evaluating Iran's moves and taking steps to counter them. Things will be clearer in the near future, Jubair said. I think that the House of Saud is headed into a cul-de-sac from which it will be very difficult to extricate themselves. Interesting piece in the Independent. Oil states are almost impossible to reform, and it is usually unwise to try. Such states should also avoid war if they want to stay in business, because people may not rise up against their rulers, but they are certainly not prepared to die for them. The most dangerous man in the world, asks the Independent, this is Mohammed bin Salman, was just 12 when he began sitting in on meetings led by his father Salman, the then governor of Saudi Arabia's Riyadh province. Some 17 years later, at 29, and already the world's youngest defense minister, he plunged his country into a brutal war in Yemen, with no end in sight. Now the kingdom is jousting dangerously with its regional foe Iran, led by a man seemingly in a big hurry to become the Middle East's most powerful leader. Prince Mohammed was still in his early teens when he began trading in shares and property. When he ran into a scrape or two, his father was always able to take care of things. Did not go abroad to university, choosing to remain in Riyadh, where he attended King Saud University, graduating in law. Associates considered him an earnest young man who neither smoked nor drank and had no interest in partying. His uncle was profiled in the Financial Times. This is Mohammed bin Nayef. The prince is the son of the late Nayef bin Abdulaziz, the long-time security chief and powerful royal, who presided over numerous crackdowns, earning the wrath of freedom activists. And it was Mohammed bin Nayef who apparently made the decision to execute Sheikh Nimr-al-Nimr, known in international circles as MBN, might have held a personal grudge against Nimr, who had rejoiced when his father Nayef died in 2012. I've got that link coming up, so if you go to Rich Wrap-Ups, you'll find the link. Pretty powerful comments he made. This was the first mass execution of political opponents since 63 religious extremists were publicly beheaded for the 1979 siege in the Grand Mosque of Mecca, saying that he is in the eye of the storm, a nephew of King Salman, the ultimate decision maker, responsible not only for domestic security but also for Saudi Arabia's policy in Syria, the main battleground in the confrontation in Iran. Very interesting. His counter-terrorism role exposed him to 4 assassination attempts, including one in 2009 when he was slightly injured when a suicide bomber concealed explosives up his backside. Since that attack, he has also taken his own security more seriously. Activists who say they've spoken to the prince via closed-circuit television screens for safety reasons call him the Wizard of Oz, one of my favorite movies. The video to which I was referring is linked up. If you scroll down on Rich Wrap-Ups, you'll find it. Assad woos Asian powers to win support before peace talks. This is India and China. India and China have similar positions that are implicitly favorable to the Syrian regime in that they both oppose regime change by force. Interesting that they're looking for India to play a bigger role. Let's move on to the markets. Germany's DAX fell below 10,000 for the first time since October. The S&P suffered its worst 5-day opening to a year on record, going back to 1929. Let's move on to the currency markets. The euro was last trading at 109.09. Dollar index around the 98.40 level. Japanese yen 117.25. I'm very bullish the yen, looking, as I said, for a move to 105 and then maybe even 95. Swissy, when I looked, 0.9942. The pound 145.29, bearish the pound as well. The Aussie 0.6976. India rupee 66.885. South Korean won 1208.32. Rial 402.64. Egyptian pound 783.93, and an unbelievable session this morning in the rand. I daren't even say the price because it probably moved, but let's get back to that in a moment. Dollar yen, let me put up a 1-year chart. Last trading at 117.25. I'm looking for a move to 105. Euro dollar, the 1 month range has been 107.10, 110.59. So let's see if we get out of that range before I start making any predictions. Dollar Canada, which I've been bearish about for eternity, now trading 141.68, and my target is 155. Gold bars fetch most barrels of oil since late 1980s. Bullion has climbed 4% this year. Brent futures have slumped 11%. An ounce of gold buys more than 33 barrels of oil, the most since 1988. The average ratio has been 16. FTSE Johannesburg Stock Exchange Africa Gold Mining Index rallied 20% this year. This is because of a weaker rand and stronger gold prices. Gold, let me put up a 1-year chart of gold. Where are we last? This has really caught a bid, 1104.40. Crude oil. I'm going to put up a 6-month chart. I think we're going to see a 20 handle, 29 something, right? As early as this week. Sub-Saharan Africa, Congo opposition to hold rallies to raise pressure on Kabila. Since independence in 1960, there has not been a peaceful political transition in the Congo, which saw decades of autocratic rule followed since 1996 by a series of wars and rebellions, mainly in the east. My friend in Kinshasa, who is a constitutional lawyer, rather an accomplished one, tells me that the constitution is bulletproof and the opposition just needs to run down the clock. Let's see how that develops. Jacob Zuma was in Gaddafi's pocket, says the Mail and Guardian. An informant told Hillary Clinton that Zuma secretly received money from Libya's Muammar Gaddafi and that he feared for his position as president. South Africa's President Zuma says reaction to the sacking of the finance minister is an exaggeration. He's entirely out of his depth when it comes to the markets and entirely in his depth when it comes to managing the ANC. South African all-share down 5.11% this year. Now, what did we see in the rand? We saw the dollar surge as much as 10.3% in the early hours, touching 17.9950 before correcting and improving to 16.72. And that was up sharply from 16.315. Let me put up a 6-month chart. 20 doesn't look such an outlier call now, does it? Egyptian pound, 783. Egyptian EGX 30 down 3.19% this year. This is a quote from the Africa Confidential. The government faces an empty treasury and oil prices heading south towards $30 or even $20 a barrel. the worst economic conditions in 2 decades. Buhari's honeymoon will be well and truly over by December. Nigerian oil share down 5.63% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index up 0.21% this year. World's biggest dam has extremely dangerous low water levels. This is Kariba Dam, which supplies Zambia and Zimbabwe. Poor rainfall, overuse of water have caused its levels to drop. Electricity generation already reduced by more than half. As at December the 28th, Kariba was 14% full, compared with 51% a year earlier. This was an interesting point. Zambia is the most vulnerable country in sub-Saharan Africa to the El Nino weather pattern. Ethnic Somalis are dying in Kenya, and some say the government is to blame. This is a report in the Washington Post. A growing number of Kenya's ethnic Somalis have vanished or turned up dead after being detained amid a crackdown by security forces on Islamist extremists. Authorities have denied involvement. We do everything that happens within the fight against terrorism within the confines of the law, said a spokesman for the Ministry of the Interior. Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, established by the Constitution, released a report in September documenting 25 extrajudicial killings and 81 enforced disappearances of ethnic Somalis across Kenya since Al-Shabaab attacked the Westgate Mall. I wrote that piece about the Teflon shilling, and it's definitely been firm. It's around the 102.30 level, but early this morning it was at 101.68, and the reasons are in that article. It's around the current account deficit, how it's improving. There's been a trend change, all because the price of oil has fallen. Nairobi oil share is minus 0.32% year to date, which isn't bad when you consider what's going on everywhere else. The NSE 20 down 2.48% year to date. I quoted Hunter S. Thompson, and I said it's been an extraordinary and unprecedented first week in 2016 in the financial markets, and it reminded me of Hunter S. Thompson. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride." Well, certainly has been. A big trade went through in KCB on Friday. 26.515 million shares worth 1.106 billion shillings. KCB is up 3.75% since the announcement about the new holdco structure. Home Africa, rallied 85.71% in December, then issued a profits warning on the last trading day of the year, and is then corrected 34.61 since issuing that warning. I wish you a fantastic week, and thank you for taking time out of your day to stop by this podcast.